What's going on? Happy holidays. I'm Coach Jason, and today I'm going to be talking to you about holiday gratuity etiquette. So I know this can be a little bit of a tricky subject. The reason that I'm actually making this video today is because I recently had one of my clients ask me what would be appropriate in terms of a gratuity for the holidays for me. And while that's certainly not a conversation that I would ever bring up, it's one that might be on your mind. So what are the rules when it comes to good etiquette for holiday gratuities for fitness professionals and other service providers? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about that today, but before we get into it, I really wanted to take an opportunity to just impress upon you that this by no means is a call for you to pony up and offer a gratuity to your fitness professional, particularly if it's not within your means. So just please understand that going into this. But the other thing that I want to point out is that in many cases, we are not the typical 9-to-5 employee that works for a large corporation. And if we were, most of these corporations or companies would offer some form of a holiday bonus to their employees. So that's where this kind of gets a little tricky, because in essence, we are your employee, whether it's me teaching a group exercise class, doing a small group personal training, or even doing one-on-one personal training sessions. And since I can only budget so much time to work, you, if you trained with me 2 to 3 days a week, may represent 10 to maybe a 12th of my total income for a given time frame. So just understand that this is not the typical situation, and it's a tricky one to negotiate, but there are some good rules and guidelines that you can kind of go by when it comes to holiday gratuities. So where do we draw this information from? Well, I found a couple good articles online. I'll actually post one of them down below that gave some tipping etiquette for the holiday season for all different types of service providers, from garbage people to mail carriers to hairdressers to babysitters to house cleaners, etc., etc. Anybody that does service for you on a regular basis or even on a semi-regular basis and works for themselves. Remember, you get a holiday bonus oftentimes, and depending on how long you've worked for the company, that bonus can improve, or what your status is and what value you bring to the company can enhance that bonus. And oftentimes nowadays, people rely on that money to provide for the holiday gifts that they end up having to afford each and every year. So I'm not sure if you've ever seen the National Lampoon's movie with Chevy Chase, but it was a very funny scene about him sitting at his desk imagining getting his family this pool and relying on the holiday bonus that he was going to use to make that pool. And obviously it didn't end up happening, and a lot of funny shenanigans came from that. But that's kind of the same concept that we're going to be talking about here today. So for example, let's just break these experiences down a little bit. So for example, if I was a group exercise instructor, which I am, I might have anywhere between 10 to 60 people in my class. So each individual represents a much smaller portion. So as a result, the gratuity that would be appropriate might be smaller from each individual. So with that being said, I want us to consider group exercise as maybe like a dining experience at, say, I don't know, IHOP. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, where a personal trainer might be servicing somebody once to twice a week or 2 to 3 times a week, that's going to be a little bit more along the lines of a dining experience, let's say like a fancy steakhouse, I don't know, Ruth's Chris. And then obviously small group training is kind of right in between. Now, here's a couple things that you might want to consider. There would be very few instances where you would actually have a bad experience at any one of these dining experiences and not leave some form of a tip. And if it was, it would be a really egregious experience that you had. Now, that's a little different because these people largely, they don't have a good base salary. They really rely on those tips. So obviously the percentages reflect that. For example, really bad service nowadays usually still gets about a 10% tip. Average service or as to be expected service is somewhere between 15 to 20%. It's recently gone up. Exceptional service, oftentimes we'll see 20 to 25, even 30% in some very generous cases. cases. These are people that really blew your socks off and made your dining experience a phenomenal experience. So with that being said, let's think about the different types of fitness services along those same lines, where on one end of the spectrum you've got personal training, more of the high fancy steakhouse end, and more of the pancake house is, let's say, the group exercise. And that's not to diminish group exercise, it's just to say that the value per unit of people in the room is going to be smaller, so it's going to be appropriate to that. Now, with that being said, you also have to think about the different levels of service. So for example, if your expectation was here, and let's say the group exercise class expectation fell shy of that, but you still had an experience, and you continue to go back, even though it may not be the optimal experience in your brain, maybe it's something slightly lower on the scale. If this was the expectation and it was met, maybe we'd be somewhere along the guidelines that I'm going to suggest. And if somebody really blew your socks off, here was your expectation, and they seriously over-delivered on that, maybe a little bit higher than what I'm going to suggest might be appropriate. So let's start off with group exercise. Group exercise, it would not be uncommon to give somewhere around a $20 tip. So for example, if you went to CrossFit and you were doing a drop-in class where there's 25 people in the class or more, usually those drop-in experiences are about $20. So usually the appropriate gratuity would be something in line with what the experience would cost if you were to purchase just one. If that experience was a little subpar, maybe it's more along the lines of $15. If it's a really mind-blowing experience, maybe you go a little bit above that. In the group exercise, small group training world, that's going to be somewhere in the middle. I would say in the small group, somewhere around the $50 range is probably going to be appropriate. A gift along that value is probably going to be appropriate. And again, if it's a mind-blowing experience, you can go up from there. If it's subpar, you can go down from there. When it comes to personal training, this is where things get a little tricky. It has a tendency to do with a couple different factors. Number one, how long have you been working with this person? And this does apply for the others too, but it really, really applies here. How many days a week are you seeing this person? If you're seeing somebody 1 day a week, it's going to be different than seeing somebody 2 to 3 days a week. Because when you're seeing somebody 2 to 3 days a week, you're taking up a much larger portion of their weekly budget, and you make up for a much larger portion of their income, and as a result, the gratuity would then reflect that. So that's one of the major considerations there. These are just some, again, general guidelines, but what I've read is, I've heard that it's somewhere reasonable between 1 session and 1 week's worth of service in terms of a gratuity, and that really depends on how much of their time budget that you're really taking up. If you're doing 1 session a week, I would say 1 session is more than adequate. If you're doing 2 sessions a week or 3 sessions a week, you may want to consider something a little bit more. Now, if the person is just meeting your expectation, that's usually a good starting point, a baseline. If the person is falling shy of your expectations, do them a favor. Give them something, maybe something shy of that benchmark that we just set, but also have an honest conversation about what you'd like to see going forward. You don't have to say that, hey, I don't like this or I don't like that. You can phrase it in a very affirmative way, a very positive way. I'd love to experience this. I'd love to have this happen. I'd love to have more communication, whatever it may be. So that's just an idea. Now, again, if they're blowing your minds, let's say you see a trainer once a week for $100 a session, and they just super knock your socks off. They create quite the experience. They're just going above and beyond what anybody else would be able to offer. Then 1 to 1.5 times might be appropriate. If you're seeing them 2 and 3 days a week, again, consider how much of their time budget that you're taking and just try to take that into consideration. So these are some guidelines that you can go by when it comes to tipping. Now, there's a couple other things that need to be considered here. Number one, like I said in the beginning, if this is not something that you're comfortable with, by all means, do not feel pressured. I just wanted to be the one to put it out there so that you didn't have to have that awkward conversation with your trainer or coach in a small group environment or whatever it is, and they don't have to, because they never would. As a matter of fact, if you were to ask most of your coaches or personal trainers, they'd say, no, nothing, nothing's fine. I don't need anything. Just, thank you is enough. And the reality is they're being very nice. They're being very polite. But the simple fact of the reality is they really would appreciate and rely on those gratuities at this time of year. But it would never be appropriate for them, number one, to say it to you, to bring it up, or even if you gave it a suggestion to them, to even respond in any way other than to say, nothing would be fine. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, if you are not financially able to do this, or even along the lines of what I've suggested, whatever you give is going to be very, very appreciated. And if you can't give something in terms of something financial, a nice tray of cookies or something thoughtful that can be handmade is always going to go a long way. And in any case, no matter what you do, even if you don't feel comfortable or can't afford this level or whatever it is, what always goes a really long way is a really nice, handwritten, heartfelt thank you letter or a short note, something with some actual words other than just like a happy holidays, to tell them how much they've impacted your life and how much they mean to you in terms of your well-being. One other little side note, and again, I don't want to say that you have to do anything here, but just think about this. If you were actually trying to think of the other person as much as you could, I get these all the time and I love them because I drink tons of coffee, so this comes in very handy. But things like very specific gift cards to, let's say, Starbucks, for example. While that's great, that's something that I can't then turn around and use to offset the cost of the holiday season that I'm going to spend on other people. So I'm not saying that you have to get me anything, and this is not for me, this is for anybody who's in your life serving you, really. But just think about the fact that it might be better off giving them a very generic, let's say, Visa gift card or American Express or whatever it is, something that has a cash value that they can use to maybe go and buy presents for their kids, family members, etc. Or even cash goes a long way that they can put straight in the bank. So again, this is by no way me trying to tell you what you must do. I'm just trying to give you some guidelines because it's really awkward to give a gift and feel that it may be inadequate and not have any idea. And that's an awkward situation because, it's weird to ask and then they're going to answer you in a way that's probably not 100% what's on their mind, but a very polite way. So then how do you do this dance, right? So the idea is that since this conversation came up, I wanted to put some information out there to give you some guidelines. And this kind of stuff also, again, in the article that I linked below, applies to anybody that provides service for you, whether it's your mail carrier, the person who takes your recycling or your garbage every single week, the person who does your lawn and doesn't own their own company. That's the kind of stuff that you need to think about or might want to consider. Okay, well, I hope this video really helps you. And if it did, do me a favor. I really appreciate it if you would go ahead and subscribe to my channel by clicking over here. Or if you want to see more videos like this one, you can look over here. Also, I will post down below my Instagram handle, my Facebook page, and my web page. So if you want to find out anything about what I do or connect with me, I'd really appreciate you sharing and liking this and becoming friends with me on all of the social media sites. Also, if you want to have me speak about any particular topic, fitness related or what have you, go ahead and post in the comments below. If you liked this video or you had any information that you wanted to share about this, also post below. And if you wouldn't mind, push that little bell icon down below. So this way, when I post new content, you'll get a notification, and all this support will really help me grow this channel. I just want to bring more content like this to the world about the little things in fitness that most people often don't talk about. So again, my name is Coach Jason. I want to wish you a very healthy and happy holiday. And until I see you next time, keep training.